speaking of the Patreon, right? We had some great things about this week. The book club is going on. We have the review preview that drops tomorrow. We have the beer show that dropped yesterday. That's on the YouTube. That's everywhere. We also have a newsletter that dropped today at 7 o'clock. It was actually at like 6:46 or something because I went back and I read it and I had to change a few things. So it's like 6:46, but it's there. It's never too late to go and subscribe to Patreon. Anything $5 and above, you get the newsletters. I think this was number 6. So there's 6 back newsletters that you can read. They're incredible. This one is very, very good this week. Colin wrote about Republican or Roman Republic populism in modern culture and the ways that you can compare and contrast the type of things. We talked a lot about that in the review preview, even referenced that there. Last month's book, or this month, I guess technically because it's still April, this month's book was Rubicon. And next month, May, the book is, have it here, The Coddling of the American Mind. There it is, The Coddling of the American Mind. That is the May book. I actually know Tyler he happened to buy it on Audible, like the day before I talked about it.
Oh,
and then
shit.
Shane just scooped it on Audible. So there's already a few people that are into this book. And this one is, I think, a little more broadly appealing than some of the other ones that we've read. So with that, let me ask you this is based on your article this week. So let me ask you this, Colin. We will get right into it. I'm going to read a quote from your article and ask you about it. Okay. So this is deep in the lower pages. This is like on the second to last page, right? So I will just read this quote to you, and then anybody who wants to learn more or read more of this, you can go subscribe to our Patreon, $5 and above, and you get this newsletter. So,
Cat's probably chasing him.
It's the cat. The cat is getting after the dog. I don't know if you guys heard that, but one of the dogs is yipping. Okay. So you're talking about populism in modern day, and let's see. This is the quote. In some ways, this is actually a good thing. Oh, here, I'll go back in a little bit. In our political system, politicians can use populism to gain enough support to get themselves into office, and thanks to our corrupt and incestuous governance system, incestuous governance system is so good.
It's a strong
There were
line.
several times reading this, found myself shaking my head, and I was like, yes. It's like, that is well written. So, yeah, no, I'm a big fan of that. And thanks to our corrupt and incestuous governance system, can quickly become somewhat immune from the need to wholly rely on populism to stay in power. In some ways, this is actually a good thing. In some ways, it is bad. It's good for the simple reason that the politician can more or less rely on the partisan systems and institutions to help keep them in power, giving them the freedom to act as they would as long as they conform to the overall party narrative and plan. So that's what I wanted to ask you about, because you framed this particular thing, and really, I guess, just ask you to expand on it, because you framed it that as like a good thing, right? And to me, it seems like it's a little bit of a bad thing, because that seems like it would be leading to some of the complacency and stuff that we see in modern politics today. We have a lot of people, especially in the House, like you're talking about populism, so especially in the House, who are able to just kind of go by every 2 years voting. And Derek Kilmer is probably a great example of that, of someone who's not really doing a lot, I would say, on a federal level. He gets a lot of money in proportion for the states, especially for the tribes. But for the most part, he's just kind of campaigning every 2 years to stay in that office. So I was going to ask for you to expand on that. What did you mean by that's a good thing?
So the good thing, the good aspect of it is essentially when it's put on balance with where populism itself can go. So once a politician rises to that level using the levers of populism to gain their popular support, to get that elected office, once they're there, they're no longer essentially subject to the whims of the mob anymore. They don't have to necessarily follow what possibly crazy or insane things that brought them to the party. And so this way, yes, it's bad when you look at it in politicians shouldn't get up there and then not fear their reelection and things like that, like they should. But, with the populist candidates that we have seen in the past, everything from an AOC to a President Trump, who we'll talk about both in the piece.
And they're fantastic examples, by the way.
Thank you. I think because they're so polar opposite, they're good examples. But if AOC was to continue to be harping on the Green New Deal as much as possible and convincing keeping that massive power of populism behind her that was screaming all the dangerous, policies and things like that, she'd just keep running with it and she'd get more and more power. And so it's really only a good thing when put on balance with the dangers of populism. that populism can bring.
Yeah.
And that is the problem. And I think I went into it in the piece relatively well. But the problem with populism is it can go both ways. Rome's history during the Republican era was filled with, what they called a dictator multiple times, where they actually fixed problems that were happening for the Republic.
Right.
And then stepped back and you would think of it today as the benevolent dictator. That's what that comes from. Whereas we think of dictators always as a bad thing because we like the separation of powers. We like the separation. Oh, sorry about that. Of individual power. We like to spread that out as far and wide as we can. So it gets weird. But if you get somebody that is truly a benevolent dictator, say, you could probably draw a parallel between Elon Musk and buying Twitter. He's now going to be the dictator of Twitter because he'll be sole owner eventually.
And private. They're taking the company private.
And yes, and that, which we'll get into later on today. But with that, I mean, it'll be a much better platform, I believe. So he's going to come in there acting as the benevolent dictator and, make some big changes probably, and Twitter will be better off versus, Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post. I don't know if the Washington Post has become a better paper after he bought it outright. So, but yeah, that's essentially why I call it a good thing in the piece, just because it could be so dangerous otherwise. Whereas you get them in there and then they're kind of benign at that point. They're
Right.
less dangerous because they're subject to a greater institution. So their individual power is much less.
And I think that tracks. If you use AOC as an example, we've still seen her exhibit some of the oomph that got her in there, especially when they were talking about Nancy Pelosi taking over as the Speaker of the House again, whether or not she was going to take that. And AOC and the squad seemed like maybe they were going to put up a fight with it, and then they were like, no, it's fine. We'll do it anyway. And with the Amazon union vote, the first one, right? She caught a lot of heat for not showing up to those rallies before the first one. And this last one, she showed up. She was there with Bernie Sanders. She's like, yeah, for sure, I'm here.
Yep.
And the protesters there, it seemed like it, I don't know, I don't want to say it seemed like it mattered more on the right, but they definitely held her feet to the flames a little bit more. The people that were at the rallies, the people who voted for the unions, didn't seem like they cared so much about her not being there as like the blanket fact that a representative wasn't there, that more federal representation wasn't there. Because every time I've seen them be asked about it, they're like, she doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter that she was not there. It matters that no one really was there.
Yeah, it could have been Jayapal. They would have been satisfied with that. Just somebody there to help bring representation to their cause.
Jayapal's been catching a lot of heat.
Good.
But yeah, for not being as progressive as she bills herself to be, like now voting as progressive and being a little bit more
involved with that
establishment-y. Exactly,
Yeah.
a little bit more establishment-y, and people seem to be wising up to,
Yeah, that's the problem with those people, man. And I don't know why, like, generally speaking in our era right now, the populist message is more or less, it's embraced more, I feel like, on the left side of the political spectrum than the right. Donald Trump was a big kind of monkey wrench into that system, but
yes,
like leftist politicians have been using populism to get elected for decades at this point. I mean, you could probably argue something similar to certain Republicans, but for the vast majority of it, it's just like, we know the Republican platform. It hasn't changed much other than a few major ones to show their kind of general left leaning further and further coming into towards the center. But for the most part, they're kind of just plain white bread. Nobody really cares about their platform. Nothing crazy going on. Whereas the left's platforms they can shift wildly depending on, what the populace is saying at the time. What are the vast majority of the grassroots leftists talking about?
And I think that's a big thing, the messaging part, like you said, grassroots, and also the broad appeal generally, broad appeal as it is to like unions. When you talk about things like that, we're talking about grassroots movements and unions. You're talking, even just in your rhetoric, you're using language that talks about groups of people. Yeah. Even though conservatives and Republicans are saying kind of the same thing, they're talking about individual workers, workers' rights, and I'm for the everyman. It's even just the words they're using that makes your brain travel one way and the other. Then when you're talking about the left, you're like, oh, well, they're talking about the masses. They're talking about everybody. When you think you listen to a conservative, you're not really paying that much attention to politics. You're thinking, well, they're just talking about one guy. And
Yeah, that's a good point. It's interesting too because the Republicans never used to talk about the working people.
right.
Ever. That was always a Democrat thing, but lately, not so much.
Yeah.
It's like the working people of the world, except everyone that's not in a union. It's only the union workers that we really care about. Nobody else.
Right.
We don't really care about the
And
private
that's
people.
people who are establishment people, it seems to me, that are like pro-union, just across the board will sell like, well, everyone should be in a union. That's the way to success, is everyone should be in a union. And they're not willing to make room for a concession for some. I've used myself an example a million times because it's such a good example of, I work for a small company where it would not benefit us to unionize. It wouldn't get us a better environment to work in a union, you know? So it's not, while I'm not inherently opposed to it, that's not the answer for everyone. There are a lot of good companies out there, not even just some. There are a lot of really good companies out there that don't treat their employees like shit because they're not trying to just, in leftist terms, extract your labor from you, you know, so they can profit off of whatever. Like, they're not trying to do that. They're trying to make money because they've invented something and they have hired employees and now they want to make money from whatever they've invented. But they're not trying to extract wealth and labor from the pleb so that they can, you know, continue to fuel the machine. Like, that's just not. No. I think if you ask Tim and Dan, they'd be like, no,
that's weird.
I would never describe my business that way. So,
oh man, especially because they are so like family and individually focused. You know, they actually care about their employees. Like, if they have something going on in their lives, like, they will actually step up and like help their employee out when they're having a bad time. Like, it's not, and it's not like a special situation. I mean, they're good people, man. Good people. I've taken, and there's plenty of other companies like that.
I've taken many personal days when I've worked there, and not a sick day, not anything. It's, I need a personal day. I got to deal with this, or like I'm very depressed today, or like there have been multiple times I've come to work. I've been there for a few hours. I'm like, Dan, I gotta go. I'm just not in it today. I just need some time to myself. It's like, that's fine. He's like, are you okay? Like, are you gonna kill yourself if you leave here? Or like, no, it's fine. Like, that's fine. Like, if you think that a day off will help you with your mindset, then I'm all for it. They're not gonna pay me to not be at work, but they're not gonna fire me because I'm having a hard day and need to not be at work. Like, I don't know. I just feel like people like that are so small business owners and are just so, they're painted as just malicious people.
Oh, dude,
They only want to give you what they have to give you by law. They don't want to give you anything else. As I sip from my Bennick Yeti mug, like, right? You know, it just, that's silly. Like, that's just a silly thing to think about someone just because they own a business. You know, you guys, you're not trying to extract the wealth and labor from your employees.
No.
Like, you're trying to build buildings and shit.
Yeah.
You know? So it's just weird.
The thing that
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat everything.